first question, and I think they leap right in on this, is on how the offensive line will look this week.
There's 5 out there for our offensive line. When it comes to moving guys around, all those things, that's more internal coaches' decisions of things we'll handle.
Okay, so offensive line is going to be the offensive line. This is interesting because one of the strengths of the defense for the Bengals are their defensive ends. So George Fant's been way better than I thought he was going to be. Especially, he's been way, way, way better than he was during training camp. But between Hendrickson and Sam Hubbard and their ability to disguise the blitz, use pressure creatively, I would prefer to have Titus Howard back playing tackle. At this point, he might not remember how to play tackle. So they're going to go with the deal where they just have Titus Howard playing his very unnatural position of left guard, which is frustrating. But in pass protection, I think it's still better than the alternative. They've tried 3 other guys that all got injured in there. And not to mention, once Patterson got injured, even when Scruggs comes back, it's an uphill climb. I've given up trying to think too much about it.
The biggest challenge facing Joe is you have to be tight in coverage, right? Joe does a really good job of going through his progressions, and he can pick you apart very easily. So you have to be on it. You have to be on your communication. Everybody has to be exactly where they're supposed to be. If you're off a hair, he'll make you pay. So that's the toughest thing playing against Joe, and also it's just his accuracy. He's very accurate. He gets the ball out quick. A ton of playmakers around him, right, where he can throw checkdowns and they can take it and turn it into explosive. So we have to tackle well when the ball is out, but you have to be tight with your communication when you're playing against such a good quarterback.
Okay, so tackling has not been a calling card for the Texans. They're amongst the worst in the league at missed tackles. I'm open to the fact, though, that because of their swarming nature, it doesn't hurt them as much as it probably should. Like, as long as their philosophy is like, all right, we're going to take our shot, we're going to try to hit the hell out of people, and maybe we miss some tackles. As long as guys are doing their part in following up and being like the second and third and fourth guys on the scene, I'm like mildly okay with it. Part of it is that the run defense is so much improved. They're top 3 in the league when it comes to yards per carry right now. It's a little bit deceptive, I think, because we all know that in both the victories and the defeats over the past 5 or 6 games, there have been a lot of fourth quarter letdowns. So like the overall stats are, I think, a little bit better than the reality, which is when the Texans have really needed stops in the fourth quarter, they haven't been able to get them. As far as Joe Burrow, the one thing to be really mindful of is that Jamar Chase, T. Higgins are all a little bit banged up. And this is a team that is all about those 3 receivers. Like, oh, crap, Joe Burrow thrown to those 3 guys is super scary. They throw to their tight ends, too. I think all 3 of their tight ends had notable receptions last week. That's the big problem area for the Texans, has been stopping tight ends. In any given week, look at all these no-name tight ends that have showed up and hit like 2 touchdowns last week. Hold on a second.
Can you anticipate what changes they're going to try to make to counteract what he's doing?
Okay, can you anticipate what changes the Bengals might make to counteract what C.J. Stroud is doing?
When it comes to planning, when you are playing quarterbacks who are coming off a really good game, you can try to anticipate some things that they may do different, but again, you just have to go off of what you see on the film, and you just have to be prepared for what you've seen. There are a lot of unexpected things that happen, and in that moment, right, you expect good players to have instincts and react, right, when they do see things differently. So, CJ's been doing a great job of that, reacting and making plays off schedule when that time comes.
Okay, so when it comes to the Bengals, one thing that Anarumo does really well is A, disguise their defense pre-snap, and B, just mix things up. He's really adept and capable at getting guys to do multiple different things. It's one of the hardest things to do as an offensive or defensive coordinator is, hey, change things up, but also execute really well. Anarumo's defenses tend to do that really well. They're very opportunistic on defense. They're second in the league in interceptions right now. They did not look like themselves for the first part of the season. Over the last couple of weeks, they've really started to look more like themselves. As far as what adjustments they can make to what CJ's good at, I would say going back to the Falcons game, defenses have started to show a lot more variety and variation, trying to flummox CJ somehow. You've seen him play coverage a lot. That's why CJ's had to hold on to the ball. That's why he's had to scramble around at times waiting for things to unfold. The really hard thing if you're a defensive coordinator is okay, CJ's got Nico Collins, he's got Tank Dell, he's got Noah Brown, he's got Dalton Schultz. Those are 4 very viable options and weapons. I think Noah Brown is more on the side of, hey, he's reaping the benefits of playing with those other 2 guys. But I like Noah Brown's emergence last week makes me feel a lot better about Robert Woods being out for at least a little while. I think Robert Woods is still going to make a difference when he comes back. But there's options. The tendencies don't mean as much when you've got multiple guys you can throw to. And I do think, though, too, teams have adjusted to what CJ's good at. And we saw that, I think, against the Panthers especially. But he's still making – he's having to make tighter window throws at times on some of the stuff over the middle, on some of those outs. But he's making those throws. He started off really rusty in the first 1.5 quarters of last week's game. And then, bam, he snapped into it, and it got super sharp. So it's a good chess match between Bobby Slowick and Lou Anarumo, defensive coordinator for the Bengals.
Easier for a veteran quarterback compared to a rookie like him, or is he making those adjustments like a veteran?
I think it gets easier with the more reps that you get, but I would say CJ is a very instinctive player, and he's made some instinctive plays that weren't quite on script, but he was able to make an instinctive play and, turn it into a big play for us. So that's what, playing in this league is all about. Players who are instinctive, players who can make plays. You coach it one way, you expect certain things to happen, you expect certain looks, but things change in the blink of an eye. So as a player, are you capable enough? Are you good enough to make those adjustments on the fly and still be a productive player in this league?
I thought the one thing, I'm trying to remember which play it was, CJ talked about, was it Noah Brown or Nico Collins over the middle at the end of the game, where he told him to run the route a little bit shallower because they'd had success with it a couple times, and he wanted to be sure that he had room to run after the catch. Like those kinds of little tweaks like that. I think CJ's ahead of schedule on that, because you can only really do that when you've got the foundation down really well. Like you start to tweak things off the foundation before you have a stable foundation, and all of a sudden it's Hurricane Harvey out there with your foundation.
It's an instinctive player. I've heard that often from players. What might be an example that really impressed you most of the instinctive play that you?
It's when you see pressure, when you see something that was not expected, and still being able to go to your answers when you do find that pressure and do it in a quick manner, right, where you're not putting the team in a negative spot.
What do you think about CJ being honored with the Offensive Player of the Week?
What do you think about CJ being honored with Offensive Player of the Week?
Huge honor for CJ getting the Offensive Player of the Week, well deserved. When you throw for that many yards, break records, is well deserved, and it's a credit to him and the work that he's put in. Also a credit just to our entire offense. Right? He doesn't get that done without the other men around him. So just happy for CJ and all the accolades that he's receiving. And it's he has a lot more to come. Right? If he continues to do what he's been doing, you expect those accolades to continue.
I gotta say one thing. Maybe I'm hypersensitive to this with football coaches. I grew up in a family like old school, like Protestant work ethic. Like feel really bad about yourself if you have any joy in life. At least on my one side of my family. And then I played for Tom Coughlin, and my college coach was kind of like this, almost that like nothing good could happen without somebody pointing out that like, hey, don't get too happy or full of yourself. There's a lot of negative. There's a lot of bad luck to come, or just like don't get too confident. All right, or you're a punk. A lot of that. So I'm always intrigued by people that like with DeMeco. You don't like. He knows you can't just sit there just admiring yourself all the time. But I also think that he balances it out. Like he says, yeah, hey, we enjoy this, but we're moving on to the next. He doesn't want to wallow in happiness or anything. You want to stay hungry, but he also doesn't shove it away that actively. I think sometimes there's a paranoia amongst football coaches that guys are going to get too comfortable and too complacent. That's probably more football coaches than normal. Like in Coughlin did that, and it worked really, really well for him. I think for DeMeco, it's like I'm not going to worry about guys getting too like I don't want to worry about guys getting overly confident unless they show signs of being overly confident. Like don't suck all the joy out of this game. So I appreciate that. It's like everything else in life. You got to find that right balance, and I feel like DeMeco has a lot of balance in that regard. Okay, so he's asking if Kaimi has to miss this game, is 3 days enough to get a sense for what Amendola, the kicker they signed to replace Kaimi, is there enough time to get a sense for what he can do?
We'll see. We got a kicker work ready at halftime.
I like you see CJ's like Juan smile when it comes to the kicking game, just like when he was kind of stone faced. Agumbawale kicked the field goal and then just let that little smirk go. I think he's like, yeah, he's taught himself how to do breathing exercises and relaxation exercises.
Last week, so we'll see. We'll see what happens.
I like this one, Lori. Let's not trip on our newspaper clippings. I like that. Let's see. On the difficulty of preparing for this week's game, not knowing the injury status of some of the players.
It doesn't stop our process. We go through the same process. Hey, things happen. That's life, man. Things don't go your way all the time. So, I continue to smile through it. And, hey, we're going to have our best guys out there, whoever is available. We're going to have our best guys out there, and we're going to play Texan brand of football.
It is a good, I don't think coaches can ever be like DeMeco can't get up there and be like, listen, we got one game plan for if Jamar Chase is in the game. We got another one if he's out. So, but there is you got to balance that. Coaches say don't coach against ghosts. Like if you're sitting there in your game planning meeting and you're going over every single contingency, which you have to do, and every possible outcome, you got to do it up to a certain level. But when you start worrying too much about like, well, what if this happens or what if that happens, you get, paralysis by analysis. So I think in trying to find that balance, that look, Joe Burrow is really good with or without Jamar Chase. Obviously, you have to worry about Jamar Chase. But the Bengals are one of these teams that are blessed with several really good wide receiving options. I think at most it's about tweaking, okay, how much we plan going into it. Are we going to have to bracket Jamar Chase or like how often do we think we might have to do it? But I don't think it necessarily has to alter the game plan all that much other than that, wow, we got a much better chance when Jamar Chase isn't playing.
For sure. It makes your job a lot easier when you have players, right, who can.
I keep neglecting. I'm reading your guys' comments and I'm not listening to the actual questions. How much easier is it having guys who can make those instinctive plays? How much easier does that make their job as coaches?
Can make what we call those instinctive plays. Those are the best players in the league. Like a lot of guys can just line up and do what the playbook says, but it's the guys who can do that extra, guys who can diagnose things quicker than others. Those are the guys who stand out. When they are smart players, instinctive players, those are guys who stand out, and they make big plays consistently each week based on their instincts.
Jimmy Ward. Jimmy Ward is a guy that's like, it's a combination of instincts and old-fashioned book learning or film watching. Like Jimmy Ward can make a lot of adjustments and help guys on the field make adjustments on the fly. So his injury is it's one of the low-key scarier injuries. Like obviously Steven Nelson being banged up isn't awesome. Will Anderson, I know he practiced today. I expect him to play just because he's young and he's so desperate to make plays. Like you can just see how driven he is. I expect him to like not be affected all that much by his knee. But Jimmy Ward being out, that's a concern as well as the 29 other people on the injury report. That's not even almost an exaggeration. Was it like 23?
Bengals.
Okay, so he was asked about, I think, just the Bengals defense and the challenges they present up front.
They have a good defensive front, starting with 91 on the edge.
That's Hendrickson.
Does a really
he says it.
good job, run game,
I'm sorry, DeMeco.
pass game, right, getting after, and he's relentless. He doesn't stop. Good motor, good finisher, all the way across the board. I think what impresses me the most about their defense is just how they attack the football. Right, they make you pay. Right, they catch the interceptions that you throw. They're not dropping them. Right, they force fumbles. They do a really good job of playing together. They play fast. Right, they have a really good scheme with their pressures, whether it's nickel pressure, safety pressure. Coach Lou does a really good job of mixing it up, the disguise element of what they're doing. They're very well coached defense, much respect for what they do defensively, one of the top defenses in this league.
So for those of you who just joined us, we talked a little about Lou Anarumo, the defensive coordinator. Everything DeMeco said, obviously DeMeco knows what he's talking about. Anarumo is really good at disguising stuff. That's been a kind of a lineage there with the Bengals for a while on defense. Their previous defensive coordinator, I'm blanking on his name, was really good at that as well. And then they also mix it up. So like the kinds of stuff that usually really upends a rookie quarterback when things are disguised really well and when they see a diversity of looks, that can screw up some rookies. The cool thing is that DeMeco's seen that for a few weeks now, really starting with the Falcons game. So this Bengals defense has gotten a lot. They look a lot more like themselves over the last few weeks. They started off kind of slow this year. They were uncharacteristically kind of logy. They haven't been as solid as they typically are. But they've been a lot better the last couple of weeks. So I think like I'm going into this anticipating the full bore Bengals defense. They've been very opportunistic. They've got a lot of interceptions. I saw a few of you note that they've let up some big plays, but I think that's more of again, the sum total of it. Yeah, not so much over the past couple of weeks on how they're varying the looks that they're giving the Bengals Joe Burrow on defense. Just two more questions here out of DeMeco.
When it comes to this mixing things up for the quarterback, it's about us and what we need to do, right? Making sure our guys are comfortable with what we're doing and making sure that we can play fast as opposed to trying to do something to confuse the opponent, right? If we played our strengths and we play well, we're exactly where we're supposed to be. Now it's up to our guys to step up and make plays, and that's what the game will come down to.
Okay, so he's asking about CJ taking that first shot at the Rockets game, which he missed. And DeMeco made his shot when he did the honorary free throw at the Rockets.
Oh, yeah, put the pressure on and tell him Coach dropped it. That's a lot of practice. My wife helped me out a lot there. All right, thank you.
Did DeMeco's wife play basketball? Or was she just like rebounding for him as he was